Hey there everybody, just Marco here with another one for you. I hope you're all well. This one's going to be my pseudo review, 1 year review of the FX30. I say pseudo, some of you may know that I don't do real reviews, at least not those thorough kind that someone like Gerald Undone might do. But I'm gonna give you my pseudo 1 year review of the FX30. I'm gonna go over some of the misgivings I had before buying this camera, as well as some of the things I've really enjoyed as far as using this over the last year, as well as some of the things I'd like to see in a future version of this camera, some of the things I find that it might have missing. Yes, there is an FX30 under all this stuff. It's not exactly a small and light camera with all this stuff on it, but if I started with a bigger camera, it would be even bigger and heavier, right? Anyway, let's get to it.
I'm reinventing myself. I'm me and nobody else. Ooh, I can't help but smile.
So before I get into the misgivings that I was mentioning, let me preface this video by saying that my intention when I bought this camera was that I use it for my professional video work, and it turns out that I ended up using it for some of my paid photo work as well. Yes, frown as you may that I use this camera for photo work. It does have the security of the dual card slots, so that's certainly one thing. But you may frown even more when I tell you that I've been using my A6700 with only the one card slot. I do take precautions when I'm doing paid work with that single card slot, but the A6700 paid for itself almost immediately. And the reason I'm prefacing the misgivings about this camera like this is because I want to tell you that the photo work I did with this camera, well, first of all, having a viewfinder is a lot nicer when doing photography, in my opinion. Mind you, the screen on this camera is fantastic. You can see I do have this little Portkeys monitor on here. By the way, I do recommend you look into Portkeys monitors if you're looking for a small, relatively inexpensive monitor for your FX30. Now, you don't need a monitor, but I like to keep the camera close to my body like this sometimes. Of course, if you're shooting like this, it's a little bit difficult unless you've got a monitor up here, right? So anyway, but this monitor on here is fantastic. The quality is amazing. I wish I had a monitor, or a screen, I should say, of this quality on my A6700. Anyway, so that was one of the misgivings, not having a viewfinder, and one of the reasons I bought the A6700 for doing photo work. Also traveling, it's lighter, smaller, and it's really nice when I'm running around shooting for episodes, but in here I'm always shooting with this. No mechanical shutter, and you need a mechanical shutter for bulb mode, and some of the paid work I've been doing with this has been architectural work. And if you're doing architectural work or you're doing real estate photography, interiors can be very challenging as far as light goes. So you're often shooting HDRIs. So you're basically taking multiple exposures and combining them to get your images. And HDR is just high dynamic range images. When you're doing HDRIs, sometimes you're wanting to do longer exposures. HDRIs don't need exposures long enough that you require bulb mode. So that was not a problem whatsoever. Client was very happy. I was very happy with the photos that came out of this when I did that architectural work. And I was shooting with the Laowa 9mm. These are APS-C cameras. For those of you who don't know, the A6700 and the FX30 both share the same sensor. Part of the reason I have these two cameras is because when I'm shooting video, I can match the colors very easily. But when you're shooting APS-C and you need something wide, you're gonna want a real ultra-wide lens. And so I've got the Laowa 9mm f2.8, did all of that, or most of that, architectural stuff with that, as well as the Sigma 16mm f1.4, and the last job was the Sony 15mm f1.4. I sold the Sigma in favor of the Sony. I did a video about that, by the way, if you want to check it out. The 9mm gives you about a 13mm full frame equivalent, so plenty wide for doing the interior stuff for real estate or architectural. So now we've covered 3 misgivings now. That was the viewfinder, no mechanical shutter, and that last one was if you're shooting APS-C and you want to shoot wide, you're gonna need a very wide angle lens if you want similar capability to like a full frame. By the way, the reason my arm is getting really sore holding this thing up isn't really because of a lot of this stuff, it's because of the lens I've got on here. I've got the Viltrox 75mm f1.2 on here, and it is a heavy lens, and it is kind of making my arm a bit sore. I am so happy I picked up this lens, one of the most capable portrait lenses on the APS-C system, if not the most capable portrait lens on the APS-C system. Yes, there are other challengers out there now. Now, if you're looking for something lighter weight, I would recommend the Sigma 56mm f1.4, longtime favorite on the APS-C system for portrait photography, and it is a lot lighter than this lens. I'm not traveling with my portrait lens anymore, so I opted for this. And I do think this is superior over the Sigma because you're getting just that much more compression too with this focal length as well. Now, if you're planning to buy the FX30 or you have the FX30, you do any kind of event stuff which you know, brings you into even outdoor stuff, but it really shines when you're shooting things indoors, like in a dark nightclub or a bar, and it's a band and you're maybe like in the audience and you're shooting up. Low light capability, f1.2, open up that aperture as large as it'll go, even if you're shooting at 60 FPS. Now remember, when you increase your frame rate, you need more light as well. But even shooting at 60 FPS in like a dark club, bar, what have you, that f1.2 is gonna come in handy. And that focal length, 75mm, full frame equivalent of 120mm, going to bring you close enough to that action. You can get some really great shots. And, you know, shooting in 4K, you can always punch in if you need, like, you know, a guitarist's hands on the fretboard or what have you. Anyways, but absolutely amazing lens for that stuff too. I actually just recently did a car spotting episode, and the 75mm was perfect as well, especially when the sun started coming down, and I was shooting that whole episode at 60 FPS. So those misgivings were lack of viewfinder, lack of bulb mode because no mechanical shutter, and the other thing was the limitation with lenses because you're shooting APS-C. Not so much a limitation anymore. You've got lenses available like that Laowa 9mm that I've got, and this, an f1.2, no issues with knocking those backgrounds out of focus with an f1.2, especially at this focal length. So all the things that we expect from a full frame camera, we can accomplish because of lens availability. It's not the way it used to be on the APS-C system. The lenses are out there. But anyway, those are the 3 things, all of which were kind of unfounded, those misgivings. It's not that I got around those things. They just didn't become an issue at all. On to the things I really enjoyed about using this camera over the last year. And I mentioned shooting at 60 FPS. Amazing. You can do that. It's cropped, of course, because it's a crop sensor camera to begin with. And then you can also shoot at 120, but that gets even tighter, actually. But I found that I don't really shoot 120, even if I've got the capability to do so. I do often shoot at 60, and I find that I can even bring that up to 120 if I really have to. Most NLEs have great ways to increase frame rate. And the thing about this camera and shooting 60, you can do it for extended periods of time without the concern of overheating because of that built-in fan. Now, shooting this episode, which I am shooting on my a6700, I've already had to stop and let the camera cool. Now, granted, I am running the camera longer than any reasonable person should. So don't let that dissuade you from buying an a6700, but this camera will not overheat with that built-in fan. Active cooling, amazing, amazing, amazing. I already told you how I like the quality of that screen when I was talking about a lack of a viewfinder. Another great thing about this camera, now, the mounting points on this camera body, I know the intention is that you can mount different accessories to those mounting points on the actual body of the camera. The benefit I'm going to bring up here with those mounting points is the fact that the cage attaches here on the side and on the bottom, whereas typically a cage is only attaching on the bottom, which I appreciate a lot because once you start kitting things out like this, it's great that the cage itself is fastened in more than one place. Now, this top handle only has a rail that's attached directly to the body and then to this, but even that rail actually has two places that it's mounted. So that's super solid. This SmallRig cage I've got has this cold shoe on the side. I can keep my mic over here while I've got my monitor over there, making for a pretty compact setup. Oh, by the way, this matte box is really nice as well. Not that it really makes much of a difference in here, but when you're out shooting elsewhere, having just even this top barn door, you'll find the bigger matte boxes have got more than just this top door, but having this when you're outside shooting in bright sunlight, that's really nice to have, especially if you're somebody who likes using filters. These matte boxes make for a really great addition. I can't complain about the build quality of my a6700. I am quite happy with it, but it is quite evident with this camera that it was built with professionals in mind. The little joystick on top, which I'm using to move around my focus point, very, very handy. The number of the record buttons is great. The tally lights on this, I can't tell you how many times I've wanted something like this on my other cameras, and I'm so happy that I've got the tally lights on here. Having the record button here in the front's really nice. If you've got the camera in front of you, like I often do when I'm doing my talking head, and I'm not using the remote functionality of the camera, that'll be something I bring up next. I can just hit that button on the front without having to reach over top of the camera. So that's really nice, a very welcome little button there. So yes, I do want to bring up the wireless capability of this camera. It is much better than my a6700, and there's a reason for that. Sony puts better wireless hardware into their professional cameras over their prosumer cameras like the a6700. So it does make sense why I get connections dropping out between the a6700. I wouldn't necessarily have those dropouts with this camera. They do occur on the rare occasion with this camera, but they do occur all the time with the a6700, unfortunately. So by the way, the mini matte box, this cage, even this little strap, which is something that you have to buy separately, and this handle on top, all from SmallRig. I am a fan of their stuff, been using their stuff for years now. If you do get the SmallRig cage for your FX30, I do recommend this strap, or your FX3. I do recommend this strap. Back in the old days when I used to shoot with a video camera that always had one of these on it, and I remember how wonderfully comfortable it was having this, and when I'm just walking around, I can just confidently do this and not worry about dropping the camera one-handed. So I do recommend that little strap. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with the cage. So if Sony's listening, and I know they're not, listening, but if I had the ear of somebody at Sony and I were to tell them what's missing in this camera or what I would implement in a future version of this camera, I'd start with one simple little thing. It's bothered someone other than myself. I heard Gerald Undone actually mention this, but when you're behind this camera and you pop the SD card out, you're seeing the back of the SD card. You actually have to pull the SD card out all the way and turn it over to see what you're shooting with. Now, they've addressed this in newer cameras like the A6700. When you pop that out, you can see what it is immediately without pulling it all the way out. So that's something that I would certainly change. And then on the viewfinder forefront again, I would actually have them come out with the option of an accessory electronic viewfinder. A viewfinder that utilizes the hot shoe on the camera or the hot shoe on the accessory top handle that you can get for this camera. That would be amazing. Then it gives us the option if we want a viewfinder, and this has also been brought up by others as well. I'd really like to see that. That'd be great. Now, something else, actually, it would be nice to have that hot shoe accommodate a flash. Now, again, you know, I know the intention of this camera is to be really video-centric. There's really no reason to have them implement the flash capability on that hot shoe. If you didn't know, that hot shoe will not accept a flash. Well, you can put a flash on there, but it won't trigger a flash, which is interesting and strange, I guess, in a way, because they do have, I mean, they did include photo capability in this camera. Why not just include the ability to trigger a flash? Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with the lack of a mechanical shutter. The mechanical shutter, can't see them ever putting a mechanical shutter in this. Mind you, there's a mechanical shutter in the FX3. If you don't know, the FX3 is the full frame brother of this camera. It's the same physically on the outside, it's just the insides that are different. It has a mechanical shutter. Unfortunately, that camera's got a 12 megapixel sensor, so I still find this camera a more capable photo camera. I can't personally do anything with a 12 megapixel sensor as far as photography goes. Mind you, that's great for social media, but for myself, I'd much rather the APS-C sensor in this camera over a full frame 12 megapixel sensor in a camera that has a mechanical shutter. It would be cool to see a mechanical shutter in this, and it can come in handy for some video-centric applications as well. It's not just a photo thing. I was talking earlier about this lens making this setup heavy, but I didn't mention this battery. This battery is pretty heavy too. You don't have to put a battery this big on your monitor, by the way. Right, anyway, so if you haven't gathered by this point, I am very happy with this camera. That's why I really haven't got a lot of things I would necessarily change about this. I have been running my A6700 longer than any normal person probably would. But that's another thing about this camera with the active cooling. You're never gonna have to worry about it overheating. Rock solid camera, Sony image quality, no overheating. It's just a workhorse of a camera, and it's been fantastic over the last year. Anyways, I hope you guys got something out of this one as usual. If so, consider leaving me a thumbs up. If not, that's okay too. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of these in the future, please consider subscribing. If you've got any ideas for future episodes, please leave those in the comments below. And until next time, keep working to make your chosen idea a reality. Peace.